Well, there's been a lot of interest in space lately in the news. I'm sure you've all been reading about things. And I know many of us have looked up in the sky and have we seen the International Space Station when we get the correct location and the correct times and where to look. Uh, and some of us have even talked to the space station. Our next speaking duo Frank Bauer, KA3HDO, and Rosalie White, K1STO, have been involved with ARISS. That's amateur radio on the International Space Station, for anyone who doesn't know, for many years. Frank is the chair of the ARISS International Working Group and executive director and board member of ARISS USA. Rosalie worked for ARRL for 24 years, I believe, and in 1987 began her space program career. Rosalie and Frank set up ARISS and have been involved with the program since. They have been great friends of DARA and have done many forums at Hamvention. So what better team could we have to tell us about ARISS and its future? Frank and Rosalie, all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, glad to be here.
All right, well, thank you all. Rosalie and I are going to team tag this, and I know Rosalie will help me make sure I don't overstep my bounds and do her charts. but yeah, we're going to team tag on this. And as you said, Ron, Rosalie and I have been working together a long time on ARISS as well as SAREX before that, the Shuttle Amateur Radio Experiment, for those that aren't familiar with that. And with that, let me get started on the presentation. So our presentation is current status and future visions, basically, for ARISS. I think everybody in this audience knows what ARISS is, but just as a quick refresher, what we do, we provide opportunities for youth internationally to talk to the astronauts on space station. And if you understand anything about the orbits, when space station comes overhead, opportunities of being able to see it is 10 minutes, which of course, from a radio perspective is the same. So we have the opportunity to give the students a 10-minute contact with the astronaut on board space station. And that contact is a phenomenal once-in-a-lifetime achievement for each one of these students. The activities that happen before then is substantial amount of education that goes along with understanding about space exploration, space research, and space communication, as well as radio science, amateur radio, and the technology that goes along with amateur radio. And the other aspect of what ARISS is about is that we are, as we all know, amateur radio is there when all else fails. And the same on space station. We are backup communications support to NASA and the other space agencies that represent the International Space Station. So I thought what I'd do next in this presentation is to give those that aren't familiar with one of our contacts an opportunity to hear one question from a different perspective. Some of you have seen these contacts happen in a school. What I'm going to provide as part of Rosalie and my presentation is what it looks like from an astronaut's perspective. And this actual question that was asked by Lucas back in 2020 was, of course, if you look at the date, which is 5/15/2020, was right at the very beginning of the pandemic. And while Lucas is asking how the pandemic has affected the astronauts in space, as we all know, we're still dealing with this pandemic situation. Let me let Chris Cassidy answer this question.
This is Lucas. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected you while you're in space? Over.
Hi, Lucas. The pandemic has affected us because it's affecting our families. Our daily life here on the space station is largely the same with or without the pandemic. We are safe and we are executing our job and keeping the space station running and functioning and keeping ourselves healthy with our daily routine. But we're concerned for our friends and family and loved ones because they're in Russia and in the United States having to deal with it just like you are. Over.
I kind of alluded to this in just a few minutes ago. We've been doing amateur radio on human spaceflight missions since 1983, with the first flight of Owen Garriott on STS-9 as part of the shuttle amateur radio experiment. As the NASA and the other space agencies around the world have moved into other locales, we have joined them with amateur radio on board, starting with the shuttle, then Mir, and now the International Space Station. And some of you have talked a little bit before the meeting about a lot of talk about what's going on in space. We'll cover a little bit of that too, because I think you all know we're on a threshold of a new era in space, and the ARISS team is working very hard to make sure we're part of that journey as humans reach out in other domains in space. We want to be there too. And amateur radio, we want amateur radio to be there too.
One of the things that we had to deal with when we switched from the shuttle missions to ISS missions was when it was shuttle, it was all the United States. And then when we switched to International Space Station, we had to share. That was all right because each of the other countries and entities who support the space station have done things for ARISS too. Like, for instance, the Russian service module is where one of the ham radio stations is, and that's where SSTV is generated from. And the ARISS SSTV sessions are so popular. It's unbelievable how many people download 10,000 images for each of the big SSTV sessions that we put on. Most of you know that ARISS USA was formed in May 2020 as a 501c3. And we did that mostly because we wanted to be able to write grants. And it was awfully complicated to try to explain who ARISS was unless we were a legal entity, and it was basically impossible. So that happened in May. That took us quite a few months to get everything, all the steps done. And you can see our strategy has stayed the same: inspire, engage, and educate students. Of course, you'll kind of see that STEAM in there, which of course used to be STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And then the arts were inserted because everybody knows that you can do all kinds of STEM things, but if you don't know how to write or speak and all those good things with the arts involved, then you're not doing so well. We continue to have very strong ties with our sponsors from before: ARL, AMSAT, NASA, and ISS National Lab. We have, as you've probably seen in news releases, have garnered some grants since we became 501c3. This shows our big major sponsors. STAN is the NASA arm, stands for Space Communication and Navigation. ISS National Lab, Airdrie Digital Communications, ARL Foundation, the ARL, and AMSAT.
Everybody knows that, as Rosalie said, we're engaged very heavily in STEAM education. Different people like to say different things. As Rosalie said, we added the A in here because arts is an important piece. Actually, as an engineer or a scientist, the arts actually provides that creativity that if you ever look at an engineering project and you think it's great, you think it's a work of art. And so we felt that was important to show both STEM and STEAM as part of our primary objective of what we're doing on ARISS. But to do those things, we have to do the other two things on the bottom, which is spaceflight hardware development, as well as spacecraft operations. And so these are our prime initiatives. There's a lot of other things we're doing, including, making sure our sponsors know what we're doing and our metrics and things like that. But clearly these are the three main pillars of ARISS. And this chart in a nutshell shows the impact of what we have accomplished and we continue to accomplish every day. And we're the very first operational payload on space station. Our equipment was placed on space station before it was permanently had humans on board. 13 days after the first crew came on board, we had our first ARISS contact, a test pass in the United States and in Russia at the time. And this was our first radio station in the upper left corner there. We do about up to 120 contacts a year, but normally it's 60 to 80 a year. It ends up being like 1 to 2 a week. As an example, we have bookends this week. On Monday, I was leading an effort for a school in Apple Valley, California. And early this morning, we did one in Laibach, Germany. You know, we're constantly doing a lot of schools every week, just about. Since our beginnings, we've done over 1,400 ARISS connections. Some of those have multiple schools in them. You can kind of see the number of students we engage every year. We've operated in 63 countries, and we just have South Dakota yet to get worked all states. Our team puts in worldwide, our team puts in about $5 million of in-kind volunteer support a year. We actually conservatively did, when we created the entity 2 years ago, we did a conservative view on the amount of support we provide in the United States, and that's about $1.2 million a year of in-kind support. And that's, of course, all volunteers. And then, you know, millions of people witness our contacts every year. Rosalie mentioned the sharing part of the international collaboration. First off, this is a picture with a lot of different school contacts over the years. You know, clearly, we don't do Canada with COVID the way it is right now in that type of environment. But we have pivoted to COVID, as you can see in the France image at the very bottom, too. Bottom line is, Europe and the United States do the bulk of the contacts, with, you know, United States doing about a third and Europe doing about a third, and then Russia, Japan, and Canada bring it all together. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about the communications capabilities we have on orbit. Rosalie mentioned that, you know, we started in the Russian segment. We actually started in the FGB called Zarya. That station actually is no longer in use. We got that opportunity because our Russian colleague knew about an antenna that could operate on 2 meters. It was used for rendezvous and docking. They didn't need to use it anymore. So we were able to bring the station on as early as possible, operate there. We next moved into the Russian service module. Each one of these pictures are actually from those various modules. The video you saw was in the Russian service module at the time with Chris Cassidy. And we have a whole host of antennas on the periphery of the service module, the back end of the service module. This is a vehicle that docks, if you can see my cursor at all. And then in 2009, we installed antennas on the Columbus module and started utilizing that. Columbus module, it's interesting because there's a Russian segment and a US segment, and the voltages are different. So everything in Russia is 28 volts. The United States, the US segment is 120 volts DC with 28 volt capabilities. The US segment, as it's called, includes the United States and the 3 other partners, Canada and Japan and Europe. We have basically 1 station in the Russian segment and 1 station in the US segment, in the European Columbus module. This is the capabilities we have. I think pretty much a number of you have heard the voice communications of school group contacts and things like that over the years, whether they're in the service module or in the Columbus module. Rosalie mentioned slow scan television, which gets a lot of interest. We have a gallery where people post our images. We also have packet radio, APRS primarily. One of the individuals from ISS National Lab who was licensed in his youth got interested. He was actually the head of education at ISS National Lab. He got his amateur radio license and started playing around with APRS and was really enjoying it. And then he did a whole bunch of research and realized that we do about 80,000 connections, if you will, through the ISS system with APRS every year. And then we have had video downlink capabilities. This is with Ham TV on amateur S-band. That's been down for a few years because it had a problem with it. We brought it down and had it repaired, and it's ready to go back up. It was a very simple issue that we got fixed, but you know, it was we had actually it got slowed down because of COVID and the fact that the organization that built it, Kaiser Italia in Italy, was shut down for a period of time. They've since fixed it, and they're ready to ship it back to the United States. We'll run some tests, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to get it up and operational again. So that's something for those of you that are interested in actually directly receiving amateur television from space, to expect that coming up in the next year. Relative to our education activities, one of the things we did was we developed an education committee. This was about 6 years ago now, to basically enhance and expand our educational outcomes and opportunities. So we have about 22, actually it's growing, because actually last committee meeting, which was earlier this week, we picked up 3 additional members. We have on the order of about 22 to 25 teachers and other individuals that are involved in formal or informal education environments that actually are helping us in a number of ways to enhance our education. And that includes evaluating basically twice a year. We have contact proposals and actually selecting the schools for that, guiding and mentoring teachers through our educational ambassador activity, sharing ARISS with the educators in conferences and presenting papers. The picture on the top was several of our education team members that participated in a panel session that we had with a one-day workshop with a bunch of educators at in College Park, Maryland, a few years ago. They create lesson plans, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the new initiatives like our radio kit in a few minutes. Joanne, the individual on the right in that upper picture, does mid-altitude ballooning, and she's done several, actually she's done some balloon contests. We're flying them across the United States because she lives in California, and letting students through the APRS network see the balloons, their altitude, their motions across the United States, and with some lesson plans to help them understand both amateur radio as well as the aspects of the weather and how the balloons travel across the United States. As I mentioned, we've developed a radio experimenter kit, which we'll talk about in some slides in the future, and then to recruit additional volunteers from the latest schools. The idea is we want to keep, teachers are busy, so we need a big pool of teachers because some of them can't support things from one day to the next. And then as we do another school contact, especially when they're fresh and they just done their contact, they're really excited about being involved in ARISS, and we reel them in and actually get them involved.
As Frank said, we do have 2 times a year when we accept proposals. We make those announcements. We do news release distribution so that everybody knows that the US is open. We have the window open for them to submit a proposal. It's a competitive process. As Frank said, they are selected. It's quite a lengthy proposal. They have to show how they can do all these different things, like involve possibly their whole school to get media attention, to have STEAM and STEM lessons that are related to both space and radio, and just a number of things that they have to tell us and describe, including their COVID plan for the school to be safe, the students, the faculty, and the hams. If things are good enough that the hams go in to help kids learn about amateur radio, they have to have a plan. And luckily in the summertime, a lot of ham radio activities are mentored by groups. For instance, this summer there was a school that did a fox hunts. Carol may get a kick out of this, or she probably has heard this type of thing before, but the hidden transmitter hunts were done by kind of grade levels, like the lower grades and then the higher lower grades, and then the middle school, and so on and so forth. And for the kids that were like 1st through 3rd grade, they hid the transmitter in a puppet, and the puppet was brown, so you couldn't really see it in the leaves and such. And when this little girl managed to find it, she was oh so proud of finding the puppet that had the transmitter inside. Anyway, that's the kind of thing they have to put in their proposals, show that they deserve this once in a lifetime chance. So this shows you some of the various activities that are done. Like Frank said, it could be the arts, it could be learning amateur radio, it could be building electronic kits, getting on the radio. Of course, that's the best one to me. Science and physics experiments. On the lower left, you'll see that one teacher had her students make helmets. And there were some pretty interesting helmets in that crowd. I wanted to talk about one photo I saw today from the school that Frank mentored in California on earlier this week. The kids were dressed up in NASA Spirit type clothing, including spacesuits and homemade spacesuits. This one young lady looked like she was probably in the 3rd grade, had on a helmet, a spacesuit top, and she had on a lace skirt at the bottom. And I thought, now there's a new style spacesuit. But anyway, Frank mentioned that we do report our metrics to our sponsors. We want to prove to them that we deserve their funding. As you can imagine, from NASA and ISS National Lab, tons of science and STEM programs would love to have the money that we are given. So we must prove to them that we are top notch. And so this is a chart from one of our quarterly reports that shows types of things in the particular quarter that were accomplishments on ARISS's part. And for instance, we won the Newsline's 2021 Amateur Radio International Newsmaker of the Year Award. And then one of our teachers was named as a judge for an AIAA, which is astronautic, I think.
American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. It's the largest it's actually not just American, worldwide aero and astro organization.
Thank you. So it was an honor that one of our educators was chosen as a judge for proposals where schools could compete for grants. And then a lot of you probably know Ruth Willett, who's been to Hamvention many times, and she's one of our volunteers. She was selected for talking about ARISS at an ARO, the Southeastern Division Convention. They did a little tape on her talking about the ARISS booth and her tie to ARISS, which she had just initiated an ARISS contact for Yoda. And so she was her usual exuberant self talking about ARISS, and I think that particular video got like, I don't know, 3,000 viewers. And it was just a little short thing, but it was a lot of fun that she got chosen to do that.
One thing I wanted to mention, Rosalie pulls this together for us for our sponsor. This only represents 1/4 of last year. We do this 4 times a year with our accomplishments and things like that. So what you're seeing is just a snapshot of the last quarter of last year.
Right, and not only do we do 4 for ISS National Lab, which is mostly a metrics, numbers, and percentages and facts report, but we also do quarterly reports for NASA Scan. So it takes a lot of reporting, and we do weekly reports to NASA too. So it's constantly keeping track of all the successes, and I'll tell you, it's fun. It's a lot of work to do these reports, but it's fun because I say to myself, oh yeah, I forgot we did that. And oh yeah, we did that. And oh wow, I forgot we did that. This particular chart was on accomplishments that were for special students. We had our first ever hearing impaired students at a school for deaf students in England. And it was pulled off such that the school had special equipment and software that could transcribe astronaut Mark Vande Hey's words that were posted on a large screen. They could see both the questions and his answers. We had some pretty good speakers from the United Kingdom Space Agency, and they did all kinds of STEM activities, just like all of our other schools. Afterwards, one of the students went up to one of the teachers and said, you know, I want to be in the space field when I grow up. And of course, that's the kind of thing we just love to hear. And then the second special contact was at a Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. We try to do hospital contacts maybe once every year or two. It just depends upon if they send in a proposal. They're required to send in a proposal too. And of course, the Children's National Hospital has many clinics, so they had hundreds and hundreds of people watching both at the hospital and at their clinics. And the hospital has teachers that plugs into the students' schools to make sure that they are still getting lessons while they're in the hospital. And they took you can see the iPads they took into the room so that this young lady on the bottom left could ask her question from her room. You can see she's got her question on a little piece of paper in her hand to make sure that she could remember. Occasionally you get the deer in the headlights when the kids are like, I forgot my question.
That happens to the best of us, Rosalie.
Every once in a while. Most of the time they practiced on the air enough that they're comfortable, but it's still a shock, especially when you have an audience full of a couple hundred people watching you. I liked the post that the hospital did on the right-hand side. They got a graphic of a rocket, and back behind the rocket is the building, the Children's Hospital building. As you know, we celebrate our 25 years as a working group, an international working group. In 1996, actually, NASA came to that time, it was SARC's working group transitioning into the ARISS working group. And NASA said, if you want to have amateur radio on the space station, you got to have just one team. We're not dealing with a ham team in every country in the world, let alone just the countries that support the International Space Station. And Frank and I kind of think they really didn't think we could do this, but we did. I wrote to the IARU societies. Dave Sumner tasked me with doing that, to invite them to a meeting, and Frank was tasked by AMSAT NA to contact the AMSAT groups in the other countries that supported the space station. Sure enough, NASA had to host us at the very first meeting, November of 1996. And that was when we all signed on the line that we would have one group that would handle everything, all the good, all the bad, all of the work, and making sure everything happens as seamlessly as we can help it. Sure, there are problems, but we power through them, and very seldom does anybody ever see that there actually is some hiccup that we've had to deal with. We are kind of a family, this international team. We've got a few people who've been on the team since day one. They're all dedicated PAMs who are wonderfully hardworking, and each team member has something that they provide to ARISS. And at the bottom, you'll see that we got a shout out from astronaut Eileen Collins in her new book about her memoirs. And she talked about her first experience and how she had a problem with her first contact. She was so upset with herself because she knew it was just a 10-minute pass. That was it. And I think, what was it, a circuit breaker or something like that, Frank?
That's correct.
And so, of course, they rescheduled it and everything was fine. But you can imagine the disappointment the kids had until they heard that it would be rescheduled. So we were pretty happy that she talked about us in her book. And this kind of just shows you, we do a chart on all of our outreach, whether it's an education conference or an astronautical conference, or whether some of the students are presenting. And this one is for outreach that we do like pretty soon in next quarter's report. It's going to say Dayton Amateur Radio Association, Ohio, and the date and the attendees. So that's, as you can see, why I was pestering Ron early on before everybody else joined in, saying, I need to know how many attendees. And we also like to say how many people watch the recording too. So we'll pester him for that too. But you can see some of the different conference talks, photos at the bottom, and club talks, festivals where we set up tables. There's all kinds of things. I also always have a chart that highlights 2 schools in the United States and 2 overseas schools. These are from last quarter, as Frank said. As it turned out, both were in Arizona, which is the first time I think that's happened in a long time. We try to have them in all states, but of course it's all dependent on education proposals that get submitted. But each of these sides shows photos, how many kids were involved. This one had 5 different schools that were tied in that all got lessons, and then representatives from each of the 5 schools came to one school for the contact. How many people saw the video, some kind of important things that happened. So for instance, on the one on the right, we had US Senator Mark Kelly had taped and sent greetings to the kids, which was shown in a video very early. Most schools do a video program just before the contact starts, to kind of get people all excited and anticipating the contact. But you can see some of the demonstrations that the kids did, the STEM demos on the bottom, photos on the right. I couldn't figure out what the heck this little girl was with her nose on the plate. That is radio waves, and Carol probably has done this kind of a demo before, where you make enough noise and the vibration, the sound waves make granules of sugar jump on a surface.
Rosalie mentioned US Senator Mark Kelly. Let me also say that that is also astronaut Mark Kelly. Mark and his brother were twins that flew both on the space shuttle and on the International Space Station.
Yes, and I have forgotten that some of you probably might not know that. And this is just kind of a metrics chart that makes it easy for NASA to see when Frank delivers this quarterly report on the big screen to all the big mucky mucks at NASA, US, worldwide.
Let me just say one other thing. Rosalie was showing the different schools, and we mentioned the significant pivot we had to make for COVID. Things are very challenging because, as you all know, the pandemic is, moving around. First off, we're working internationally. You know that things are different in one country to another relative to where the pandemic is, and what the protocols are. The local protocols are different, even in the United States. Everybody knows that. So we have to work with the schools to, let me put it this way, we're not enforcers, but what we do is we help the schools think about what their local protocols are and give them some guidance to remind them, this is your protocol, so how are you meeting your protocols? And that's all we do with them. But the most important thing is to help them with that. And so we do that with every school. Every week, we're meeting multiple hours in a day to have this discussion, because we're doing 2 schools a week. The other part of it is, in a number of cases, some schools aren't meeting in person. Some of them are partially meeting in person, and some of them are social distancing or wearing masks and things. And so we've relied more on live streams to bring the outside audience in, because they can't normally come into the school. The school is for its students and for the teachers, and not for a bunch of outsiders to come in. We've done all of this pivoting of live streaming, and one of the things that's come out of it has been very interesting. Is if you go to our YouTube channel on our ARISS.org website, you can kind of see how things have evolved, and it's become a big video production at the school. Very interesting work that they do, and very impressive. Right now, I'm going to talk a little bit about future initiatives, and I know Rosalie will speak up if she's got some things to add, just like I just did, and where we're heading with ARISS. We all talked a little bit, like I mentioned earlier, about what's happening in space. Last year was a phenomenal year of transformation of space, something I wanted to see 20, 30 years ago, actually. We're actually starting to let the general public be able to go into space. And, some of them aren't big missions, some of them are. Inspiration 4 was, a multi-day orbiting mission, which was pretty cool. So what we're trying to do is to leverage that, as well as to develop a new way of doing business for the future, to the point where we've termed this ARISS 2.0. So basically, it's our new education vision for the future. How are we going to inspire, engage, and educate students and lifelong learners? And that was one term that the head of education at ISS National Lab was very adamant in making sure everybody understood that the ham radio community does exactly that. They do all kinds of different things and learn about radio technology through their whole lifetime, doing things that we all know FT8 wasn't there a few years ago. Now people are doing that stuff on a regular basis. So what we're trying to do is to provide more extensive educational outcomes through the use of engaging projects, experiments, and lesson plans with a whole diverse set of wireless capabilities and available 24/7. So we're not replacing the school contacts. What we want to do is augment them. We want to augment them also with multiple human spaceflight missions, both in Earth orbit and in deep space. In other words, space station. Now, this past week, on one side, you heard that the US government and NASA and the other space agencies have agreed to keep space station alive through to 2030. Then you also heard that they're going to put it in the ocean in 2031. What NASA's doing, because I was engaged in this when I was a NASA full-time employee, is commercializing everything we can with relative to space. That's why SpaceX is flying routinely humans to space as compared to a NASA vehicle, if you will. There's a company called Axiom that's actually going to be flying modules to space station. Those modules will get attached to space station. They have solar panels on them. Their intent is they're making their space station so it can be decoupled from the International Space Station and operate as a separate space station. We are working very closely with Axiom. They're one of the first, and there's a few others that are building space stations now. They just got started, but Axiom's the furthest along at this point, and we are working with them to, what they're going to do first are fly astronauts to the International Space Station and spend some time there, 10 days, and then a month or 3 months, and then up to 6 months on space station as time progresses. And as they put modules up, they'll be able to do the 6 months because they'll have the resources to be able to do that. The other things are, and I have on here, commercial space stations. And then the other aspects are lunar activities in deep space, if you will, the Lunar Gateway, the Artemis vehicles, and lunar landers. So we're working, as you saw in the beginning of this presentation, we've moved from shuttle to Mir to International Space Station. We're trying to work all of these other human spaceflight vehicles to what Roy Neal, K6DUE, put into my head and Rosalie's head. We want to expand out amateur radio in space with humans as they go further. And so that's what we're doing in ARISS, the team. Some of these initiatives are underway. We're working with Axiom on private astronauts potentially using our equipment. We're doing these balloon launches, mid and high altitude balloon launches that Joanne Michael has been working from the education committee perspective. And then we have several initiatives in development. I'm going to talk about these in just a couple charts here. One is the student mission control activity using a flight Raspberry Pi that we're developing. Another is called Stereo, or Student and Teacher Education via Radio Experimentation and Operations. That's a radio kit that we've developed along with some other aspects of it. A new activity that called STAR, or Space Telerobotics using amateur radio. And then ARISS, or the Amateur Radio Exploration, which is the development of the systems for lunar missions. And as part of these initiatives that are under development, we are partnering with underrepresented organizations to help that. One of them, you probably saw Tuskegee Airmen. We've been working with them for several years, and the youth there are going to be involved in some of these projects that I'm describing. So our Student Mission Control Project is actually a National Science Foundation grant that the ISS National Lab won with us as a proposer, a partner in it. It's a partnership between ISS National Lab as the lead, University of Berkeley, and ARISS USA. Our part of this is the ARISS on-orbit ARISS Pi student on-orbit sensor system that we're going to be flying with a suite of sensors that are going to be connected to the head of the Raspberry Pi. We'll actually receive data from inside space station and downlink it down through our amateur radio system. And this is a description of it. Basically, we have the sensor measurements coming in. We've got a host of sensors into our ARISS Raspberry Pi. The telemetry data goes into the Kenwood radio, low-speed telemetry down from space station, and either our ground stations, SatNav ground stations, or our radio kit ground stations in schools will pick up the downlink and shove it into our student on-orbit sensor system cloud server, which will go into a student mission control server. In a nutshell, what Berkeley is doing in this is coming up with scenarios. Let me just say this. If you're just looking at telemetry, it's boring, okay? But if you can put a story around that, it gets students excited about mining the data and trying to understand what's happening. Like, you know, when the space station had this this issue where it actually flipped 540 degrees, spin and a half in pitch. Well, how did that happen, and how can you control that, and things like that, and look at the telemetry and what happened there. So that's what we're trying to do. You know, there's things with us. We'll have an oxygen sensor on there. What happens when all these new crew members come on board? Does the oxygen level go, you know, the percent oxygen level go down during that? Those are the kinds of questions that students can ask with our systems. Another thing that has been sponsored by ARDC is a project called Stereo, which stands for Student and Teacher Education via radio, experimentation, and operations. And this is a substantial boost, excuse me, to our STEAM activities in ARISS. And we're going to be doing three primary things here. One is we're going to deploy this wireless electronics kit, the software-defined radio. It's basically an RTL SDR, but it's more than that. And we call it Sparkies, for Space Pioneers Amateur Radio Kit Initiative. And so we're going to deploy these out up to about 80 kits to schools around the world every year. You know, the first year and a half of this is getting ourselves, our kit that we have right now, to a maturity level that we can take it and deploy it out to a school, mass production, if you will, deploy them out to schools. But you can't take a kit like this, or any kind of kit, and just throw it over the fence to a teacher. So another important part of this is teaching the teacher. And we're going to have workshops and outreach at conferences and things like that to show the teachers how to use the kit, how to develop a winning proposal for ARISS contacts, as well as to learn some of our lesson plans. And then the other part of this is ARDC has provided funding to support the sustainment of our contact operations. Our contact operations are about $160,000 to $180,000 a year. I mean, we have to pay, we have to have 2 individuals down in Houston to support our program, as well as a bunch of other infrastructure that they bring to the table through their contract, because we have to have somebody that can work directly in the NASA environment. This is helping support that activity. And this is the Sparki radio kit, if you will. It includes several different capabilities to show wave propagation. Circuits we've included in this the Snap Circuits electronics kit, which actually we as part of that build a Morse code key and do codes and ciphers with this. And then of course the big thing is the software-defined radio, where they can learn about the whole radio spectrum, if you will. Another project which is named as a memorial to Keith Pugh, W5IU, one of our star volunteers, if you will, is called STAR, or Space Telerobotics Using Amateur Radio. This is, if those of you that are familiar, ARL developed this capability called Maria. It's using APRS. This came out of the Teachers Institute, using APRS to command robots, you know, these little bobots, and run it through its paces. What we want to do is operationalize that. In other words, what we want to do is to take our radio kit, our Sparki radio kit, and actually incorporate the software of that system into it with robots, and allow the students to be able to learn about radio technology, to actually control these robots in the same room, in another room, so that they're doing it telerobotically, like NASA does with the Curiosity rover and all the other rovers around in Mars, and rovers that have been on the moon, and then, you know, go across town using APRS, and even beaming their signal through space station to another school in another state, if you will.
I just wanted to add that the ARL Foundation is paying for, or has agreed to pay for year 1, and ARL Inc. has decided to help us raise funds for year 2.
Thank you, Rosalie. So what I wanted to show is where we are on orbit and where we're going to do this. So we've got some of these ground system capabilities I just described. In white is what we have on space station right now. And we developed that as our foundational element. Our interoperable radio system is such that we can add stuff to it. We have a power supply that we can add lots of things to it, and as well as with the Kenwood D710 GA. The other things in yellow are things that are coming up. I mentioned Ham TV. Ham TV will be up within the year. I mentioned the ARISS Pi that we want to fly on space station. We also have an L-band uplink capability that we want to include. And then we also, as part of the ARISS activity, in other words, the activity of developing the lunar systems, we're going to do an ISS testbed with that. So with that, we have all kinds of capabilities for lifelong learning for hams, for lots of different opportunities for students. We're going to go back into being able to do television downlinks and link these things. Let me just say that the Sparki system, the SDR that we're using, I've used it personally to pick up the APRS signals and actually see the messages coming down, use it for slow scan television, and you can use it for the school contacts. So the students that don't have their amateur radio license can actually start to do that, get enticed, and become hams. And so what we want to do is we are using this platform on space station and other vehicles to support our education and our operations. This goes back to the triad I described earlier of education, operations, and hardware development. So this is the ARISS experience. One thing I did want to show is that we have been very unique. We've had a very unique platform over the years. And it's been very interesting to see how we inspire others, and they see us and then they start doing things that emulate some of the things we've done in media that they're doing. As an example, this book on the right, Ada Lace, is a book, it's a youth book about a little girl that gets a ham radio and then starts to ultimately talks to the International Space Station. You know, there's been other there's been a recent small movie called Decommissioned that was inspired by our SuitSat back in that we flew in 2006. So lots of different, and National Geographic has done their prequel for Mars. Was a girl, again, another girl with a ham radio wanting to talk to space station. So with that, I think the last one I wanted to bring up is that if anyone is interested in helping, you know, we are always looking for volunteers. We have a number of positions open, and we welcome that. Rosalie, any parting comments?
Just like the picture says, we want you.
And with that, we have 2 websites now. Of course, our ARISS.org, which everyone I think knows is our international website. These are both of, and that we also have an ARISS-USA.org. Because we're an entity, we have to have a separate one. IRS is looking for that, as well as the state of Maryland, which is where we're located. But you know, those are where you go to get the information you need about the ARISS program, as well as Ron coming to us asking us to give this talk. So with that, we'll open it up for any comments, questions.
Okay, you might basically, I have heard about this stuff about the Artemis project and everything like that. Can you at least give me this idea of what kind of systems that would be developed? Like, are we looking for just voice, just code, beta?
All right, so I had a feeling this was going to come up. So I shared my screen again. This is what the concept the latest concept we have right now, which is basically what we want to do is have something external. Actually, this was for Artemis. This was a proposal we went in with Artemis, but it also supports Gateway, because our original development was bigger than what Gateway could accommodate. And so this is basically a what we call an antenna and a camera hat. It's that green thing here. That's external. It's going to be surrounded with cameras and then antennas. Our radio system's going to be inside this. We are basically doing it with a software-defined radio. Using when we do ham TV, the downlink is DVB-S 2, and so what we were going to do with this was DVB-S 2X. So basically, what we can do is it'll all be digital, but digital can be everything. So we can have audio, video, telemetry, pictures, and everything else. And that's how we want to run this. We've done the, recognize that the distances are significantly different than space station. It will require a bigger antenna. What we're talking about is about a meter and a half antenna type of a system. We will have, as it shows in the bottom down here on the right, we are getting some bigger ground stations to help if we need to, especially for like Artemis. We were going to run lower power than we would on Gateway. Let me just say that this is still, we're working with NASA on this and the other space agencies. We don't have anything definitive in the system yet, but they've been listening to us. They've been working with us. We actually, the last bullet in here, we're working with NASA's frequency coordinator. The ITU ends around lunar orbit. And so we need to make sure, the first thing they came to us when we came in to talk about this, they said, you need to be coordinated with the International Space Frequency Coordination Group. Well, that's happening. Last week, I did talk to Kathy Sham again, and she said that the sets of frequencies we put on the table, they're looking at them, they've been evaluating them and things like that. So, there's a part on the outside of the vehicle and then a part on the inside of the vehicle that we plan on having. And we would utilize the gigabit Ethernet capability to send and receive inside the cabin, if you will, when there's crew members. But this thing's going to operate more like a satellite. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Just also kind of wondering if there's actually kind of any plans for any kind of installation that may be on the moon itself.
Okay, so yeah, we're looking. So let me just say this. We worked really hard on this, and then we've kind of paused for a bit, and there's a reason for that. Let me just say that the positive is that, and I'm using the United States NASA, the positive is we've gone through two administrations, two presidencies, where both presidencies wanted us to return to the moon. That's very important. Because now I think we've gotten to the point. See, that was one of my jobs when I was at NASA. I was chief engineer for exploration. So, our lunar program got moved to an asteroid program, and then now it's back to a lunar program again. The space agencies need the stability, and all the space agencies really want to go to the moon at this point. That's step one. There's basically some work going on right now as to what parts of Gateway are going to be flying when, and how the lunar program from a NASA perspective is going to move forward. And what that means is that probably the earliest we would see any equipment on board would be like 2027 or 2028. So, this being 2022, we've still got, several years before that happens. What we are doing is exactly what we did with Space Station. We kept having conversations with NASA and the other space agencies to get radio systems on Space Station, and ultimately we did it. We're doing the same here. Right now, the first couple modules that are going to fly as part of Gateway are just flying very small instruments to do space weather activities, which is critically important for astronauts to know the radiation environments. And so, they're basically radiation detectors and basically looking at the ionosphere around the Earth. So we're still in play on this, but it's just going to take us a little longer than what people originally anticipated. At one point, there was discussion about 2025 us, not us, but it's several payloads flying. That isn't materializing. It's looking like it's going to be like 2027 timeframe at the earliest. And relative to the lunar surface situation, we have elected to continue to evolve this while the space agencies and the commercial companies build systems that can last more than one lunar day. A lunar day is, you've seen the one side of the moon's always facing the Earth. So one lunar day is basically a month for us. So a lunar day means that when you land on the surface of the moon, you have a maximum of 14 days, and then you get into the night of the moon, and the temperatures are so low, the electronics die, and their batteries die, and the whole system dies. So we don't want to fly a 2-week mission. We would like to fly a longer duration activity if we're going to go to the moon. And so we're working and understanding where those commercial providers, in particular, the landers, are going. Their second or third generation landers are going to be survive the night, and that's the ones we want to be on. So we're trying to do this logically and to a point where we actually are utilizing the volunteer and dollar resources as best as we can, if that all makes sense.
That does have.
Hedge our bets.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there was a question in chat from Jocelyn. Will the Sparki software be available for download?
That's a good question. We think, yes, ultimately we will be doing that because that'll maximize the delivery of this. One of the things we did, and I didn't mention this, and this is important, and I think a number of you can resonate with this. We started to build this kit, and we thought, well, we could build this very cheaply because, these SDRs are only $27 or whatever. But then we realized that in our shacks, we can do whatever we want with our computers. We can do whatever we want, but with the software and things like that, you can't do that in a school. And so what we did was we developed this to be self-contained in the Raspberry Pi. And actually the whole kit includes antennas. It includes a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, the Raspberry Pi, a whole system so that it's just plug and play, standalone. The teachers can use it as simply as possible and don't have to do a lot of pre-work, because if teachers do too much pre-work, it won't get used in the classroom or won't be used in an informal education world. But there are individuals that might want to use this in other domains. This is going to be an open source it is an open source capability, and we will make that available. Okay. But what we want to do first is to spend the next year to year and a half making sure that it's ready for prime time so that we aren't having to spend a lot of time with the teachers or anyone else trying to explain some feature that's in there that really shouldn't be in there, if you know what I'm trying to say. And the other part about it is, how do we, as hams, we enjoy it, but our kid's gonna enjoy it. And I got a taste of that with my grandson by actually letting him play with it. And it was the interaction where actually I had a radio, and actually I'll admit it was a family radio service radio, and he got to talk into the radio and see his voice and make whistle noises and see the lines on the thing. The interaction part is what one of the things we want to do in the next, not 6 to 9 months, if you will, with like the Tuskegee group, is to try to learn some things that we need to incorporate in here to capture the students, because that's what we all want. We want to give them, when I was young, a long time ago, I liked listening to shortwave and hearing all of these stations from all around the world. And, kids nowadays have everything on their phone. And so we have to look at things from a different perspective, and it's not just the hams that can develop something and get the kids excited. We have to understand that, and the only way to understand that is to bring some kids in and to actually get them to engage with us on it for a few months. Okay.
Okay, Tom asked, is the female astronaut in slide 1 Sunita Williams?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
That's Sunny. Loves dogs too, by the way. If you haven't ever seen her on television with her dogs.
And she also liked to she liked to rag chew.
Okay. Let's see, from John, do we have an interest doing an ISS contact at a venue here in Dayton?
Submit a proposal. Yes, we'd love to have you all do one in Dayton.
Actually, from my experience, I was approached a while back, and I think I talked with both of you on it. And it was an out of the question thing. It was the Montgomery County CVB, and they wanted to do some communication, but it was only like a week later. They didn't know what was involved in the program, and it was an impossible task to ask. But beyond that, I haven't heard anything else from them.
Well, there's a lot of things we could do there. Ron, you're right. We are planning, as we speak, every week we have a meeting with the international ops team, and they're planning contacts 6 months out. And so, we've got the exact week, as to when this school is going to do this and that. So we need to know, on the order that much time. What we are about ready to do is to have a request for proposals for which will it's going to open up in just a few weeks, actually, for the beginning of 2023. So and that proposal window will probably close around, and I don't want to say, don't hold me to this, because you'll see it in the in some of the bulletins that come out, but in the April timeframe is when the proposal window will close, and then we'll select schools and then move forward. We would love to see one in the Dayton area. It would be fantastic.
Okay.
Ron?
Yes. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, first of all, fantastic presentation. And I would only have wished that a fraction of these resources had been available when I was making the SAREX contact so many years ago. Allow me to share with you, when you were looking to promote the excitement and the inspiration. In 30 years of teaching the radio program, nothing even came close to when we did one of these space contacts, or as a self-proclaimed astronaut groupie myself, the excitement of speaking with the astronauts, be it in space or at W5RRR, even after we had spoken to some of the astronauts in space, was immeasurable. And like I said, I wish these resources were available, but I will share with you, toward the end of my career, a young man came into the classroom and he wanted to share with me that he had become an engineer and was working at the Goddard Space Center and had gotten the opportunity to work on the Hubble telescope, and that he never would have known what radio astronomy was had he not been in my 7th grade ham radio program. So the ripple effect, you never know who's being inspired or influenced with all the excitement that you guys have to offer. So never give up what you're doing. It works.
Thank you, Carol. You said it best. It is amazing what this program does. And Rosalie and I have been doing it for a while. And you just described why we continue to do it and have the passion. And there's and it's just so good that we have this group of people from in the United States and around the world that have this, that share the passion that you do, and see what, you know, happens every week with these students. It truly is a once in a lifetime opportunity for them, and it does change their lives.
Well, Frank, every year we have been, I have been part of this program at what we call Tech Fest here in Dayton, Ohio. And we, it's a consortium between University of Dayton, Air Force Institute of Technology, Wright State, and also Sinclair, which is the host organization that puts this on for youth. And it's a quite a event. We started out with these little FM radio kits. We offered the students to build on site. And the reason why we say on site is because we have the technicians or Elmers that are there to help answer questions as the students build these. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes per kit, but when they leave, they have a working radio. I'm wondering, you know, your Sparki kit, if it'd be interesting to maybe have a sample of that when you feel like it's ready. Maybe I can go through it and find out, you know, the what it's going to take to maybe put this integrated into a program that we have with these other kits. Give you an example, the last year we did this before COVID, we had over 300 kids build either the FM radio kit and or the crystal radio kit. I mean, every ham operator got started with the crystal radio kit saying, wow, how can we get signals from just a couple pieces of parts and no electricity, no batteries. And it just, it still amazes me that, that, you know, that you can still spark that. And I love that name, Spark. Get that spark into the kids' mind, and some of these kids come back the following year and they build it again. And I said, well, why do you want to do it again if you already did it? Well, this is so much fun. We don't get to do this in school. and so,
True.
you know, that's why I'm thinking, you know, yes, kids are getting used to the, you know, the smartphones and everything, but still there is an element that I would like to integrate this. And if you can help me out, that would be great. I mean, I think I can give you my opinions on it and let you know, and hopefully we can improve on what's there. And hopefully we can get more kids interested in space and technology.
That sounds good, Steve. Yeah. Ron can give you my email address and we kind of work on this. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Good. Great to hear what you're doing. And it gets back to that same thing where it's the thing that inspires them is the feedback they get. They play with something, they see something, and it's like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. So great.